right, before we get started, if you want exclusive early access to interviews just like this one, then join us on the Liz Wheeler Show community on Locals. It is very intuitively lizwheelershow.com/locals. If you use my promo code, which is access is the promo code, you can get 1 month free on your annual subscriptions. With me now, I have a special guest today. He is host of the Andrew Klavan Show. He's author extraordinaire. I know he's written about 100 books, so you can look them up for yourself, except for this one. Drew, good to see you and congratulations on this beauty.
Thank you very much, Liz. It's good to see you.
So the title of your book is The Truth and Beauty, How the Lives and Works of England's Greatest Poets Point the Way to a Deeper Understanding of the Words of Jesus. That's deep. But before we get to the deep part, I obviously looked at your book, read your book, and I was struck by something. On this back page here, there's a picture of you and you don't have glasses on, and I almost didn't recognize you.
Yeah, the glasses are actually a disguise, but I don't know. Somebody took that picture of me. A photographer just dropped by and took that picture of me one day, so I thought, well, there it is. It's the one I've got.
It's dashingly handsome, don't get me wrong, but no smile and no glasses, and you're barely recognizable. So this is a very interesting book. Of course, you are on a lifelong faith journey, if you will, and in your bio in this book, it says that you actually learned Greek to better understand the original words of the Bible. Is that true?
Yeah, I was talking to my son Spencer, and I was talking to him about how puzzling some of the things Jesus says are. That we repeat them all the time, but do they really make sense? Well, like when he says, like, love your enemies, like, I don't even like my enemies. Why would I do that? And he said to me, you're trying to understand a philosophy instead of trying to get to know a person. And I thought, gee, that's a disgustingly smart thing to say, because really, when you know people, when your parents, or your spouse, or your brothers and sisters, you don't really think of their philosophy of life. What you think of is, if he were here, he would say this, or he would see it this way. So I thought, I'm going to reread the Gospels, which I've read a million times, but I'm going to reread them in a new way, which is that I'm not going to think about theology at all. I'm not going to think about what Paul said at all. I'm not going to think about what the Catholic Church, Protestant Church, nothing. I'm just going to listen to this guy to get to know him. And in order to do that, I wanted to get as close as I could. So I taught myself Greek, not very well, but I could read about 5 sentences a day and translate them. And I worked very hard. Greek is a bone-crushingly tough language. The ends are different in each tense, and the beginnings are different, and the middle can be different. It's just a very, very tough language to learn. But I did learn it, and I read it very slowly and got through it, and it was just kind of an amazing experience. Like the reason I started writing about these poets is because as I was reading, I thought, oh, now he's saying a lot of the same things that these poets said. And I think if I look back, since I found Jesus in literature to begin with, I think if I look back to this literature, it can explain some of the things he's saying in a new, kind of fresh way. And it was such a big experience for me, I thought I'd share it, basically.
Yeah, I was just going to say, somebody's got to do this, and it's not going to be me, so it should be you, because you're qualified to do this. So, but Greek, that's an insane thing to do, to learn Greek. This is an undertaking that very few people do, but I won't put you on the spot. I was originally going to ask you to say something to me in Greek to prove it, but the proof is in the book.
But I could dance around like Zorba if you want. That would, as close as I can come.
It would increase the viewership of this video, but I don't know that the control room would like that. So interesting, though, you say that you decided to put preconceived notions aside, maybe things that Paul had said, maybe things the Catholic Church had said, and just try to get to know Jesus. Was there any preconceived notion that, having put it aside and getting to know the man, the Christ himself, that you realized your preconceived notion was incorrect?
Yes. At least it cleared away, it changed my priorities, because a lot of times, you think of all the stuff that Jesus says to do when people say, how do I find the kingdom of heaven? He says, well, don't commit murder, don't steal. And I was thinking about that, and I thought, I mostly already do that stuff. And certainly, the king of the universe didn't have to suffer death to tell me to be a nice person. I kind of would know that I should try and be a nice person. And when I went back and read it, I realized he's saying all that stuff as a preliminary. He's saying, don't let that, don't let your greed, don't let your lust, don't let your idols get in the way of what I want you to do. And then the next question is, well, what do you want me to do? Once you've got all that aside, or once you understand that you shouldn't be wrapped up in money, that you shouldn't be wrapped up in lust, that you shouldn't be wrapped up in kind of your flesh, what am I supposed to do, And I found certain phrases that he said kind of leapt out at me in ways that they hadn't before. Like, he says, I want the joy that's in me to be in you. You think, well, that's kind of interesting because a lot of people struggle with Christianity and they think of it as a struggle, trying not to do bad things, but he wants the joy that's in him to be in you. He wants to have life, but have life in abundance. And he wants you to be a branch of his vine. And all of that stuff is explained by the poets. And this is not a book for people who read poetry. I know people don't like poetry that much, so it's not about that at all. It's about people living in a time that is almost uncannily like ours. It's about these genius poets who were living at a time that was where radical politics and conservative politics were at war with one another. People were questioning gender roles. They were questioning marriage. They were questioning God because science was exploding. And suddenly, for the first time in maybe 1,000 years, maybe 1,800 years, people were saying, well, maybe the church is a bad thing. Maybe Jesus doesn't exist. Maybe God doesn't exist. For the first time, actually, people were saying that in a big way. And so it was very much like this moment. And these poets had to kind of say, well, everything is falling apart. Europe is falling apart. Our old culture is falling apart. How do we rebuild it? How do we rebuild the way we look at things? And it was really about how you see things. And when you go back and look at Jesus, what he is saying is, I want you to see things in a certain way. So when he says, for instance, love your enemies, he doesn't say love your enemies because it'll make them nicer. He doesn't say love your enemies because the world will become a better place. He never says the world will become a better place. Anybody who thinks Christianity is there to make the world a better place has not read the book. He tells you the world is going to stink. He tells you that again and again. He tells you these things to love your enemies so that you will be the son of your Father, so that you will see what God sees. And when you see the world as God sees the world, it is in fact a world of love and joy. That's what creation is. To live like that takes attention. You have to pay attention. And you have to sort of understand what it is you're doing with your life. You have to understand, one of the things these artists, these poets learned, and they had to learn it because everything had fallen apart, so they had to put it all back together again, was that you're actually in a collaboration with God. When you walk down the street, when Liz Wheeler walks down the street, that's an experience no one's ever had before and no one will ever have again. And so you are actually creating something that wasn't there before. So you are actually part of creation. You are a continuation of creation. That's a different way to live than most of us live. Most of us are not paying much attention and we let things go by. We let this kind of beautiful life go by. And as a result of that, we don't know what our inner life is supposed to be for. If you notice, when people talk about the inner life now, they say two completely opposite things. They either tell you that your inner life is subjective and therefore doesn't have anything to do with the truth. So they say, well, you think one thing is right and I think another thing is right. And, you can't tell which is true and which is not true. They have one culture, we have one culture. Who knows what the right thing is? And the other thing they tell you is that your inner life is absolutely sovereign. So if you suddenly decide in the course of this interview that you're a man, poof, you become a man, and anybody who says you're not is hateful and saying a terrible thing. Neither of those ideas of the inner life are true. What these poets were telling you is that your inner life is a collaboration with God. It is a new thing. There's never been you before. There's never been me before. It is a new thing in creation, but it is a collaboration with the oldest thing of all, which is the creation. And so you can actually begin to find your way to the truth and beauty, which the poet John Keats said, beauty is truth and truth is beauty, and that's all you need to know. Once you start to live your life that way, that's actually true. You can actually start to see what is beautiful and what is true, and not live in doubt and not live as if you can change yourself by simply imagining something new, and also not thinking, well, there's no such thing as good or bad, and nobody knows the answers. It takes work and it takes attention, but it is a beautiful way to live because it's a way to live that has purpose, it has meaning. So even when you're in pain, when I talk about joy, when Jesus says the joy that's in me, he doesn't mean being happy. I always hate that Christian thing where you say, how you doing? Oh, I'm blessed. I'm blessed. Yeah, my wife left me, but I'm blessed. I lost my job, but oh my God, no, when bad things happen, you're sad. And when happy things happen, you're happy. But you have to live, what I think he means by joy is what the poets called gusto. You just are in life. You're totally in it. And the fact that it's your life and it's new and it's an act of creation, just you're looking at things as an act of creation. I don't know. Writing the book changed me. It kind of elevated my consciousness in this weird way. So I'm kind of hoping it'll have that effect on other people as well.
So you say that this book is for people who don't read poetry because a lot of people don't read poetry. I don't know what you're talking about. when you say that, because I mean, I read The Big Red Barn and The Lady with the Alligator Purse to my daughter this morning, and if that doesn't count as poetry, then I don't know what does. No, but look at this cover. Look at this cover. This is actually a really interesting parallel that you draw. So these individuals, you know, Lord Byron, John Keats, John Milton, W. Blake, these individuals, I think a lot of times, we've all heard their names, but a lot of times we don't think, oh, let me pick up this book, let me read this book, let me delve into dense poetry. But it's a whole new perspective to think about it as being almost a parallel to the culture war that we are trying to wage against Hollywood right now. Because that's the original intent of theater or performing arts, is to change culture, to mold people's ideas and the way that they think about anything from religion to world events. And Hollywood, as we all know, has twisted the idea of morality. They have warped they're trying to destroy objective truth. And if you look at it through your perspective, this is what I find fascinating. These group of men were using the medium of their time, which was poetry. It was very popular, to try to launch this counter assault against the war on objective truth that was happening at that time. And that makes their words, I think, so much more relevant to those of us who are fighting the culture war right now.
And their lives, too. I mean, I tell a lot of the stories of their lives are so interesting. They're tragic. They're funny. They're full of drug addiction and, and affairs and all the things that poets do while they're creating this wonderful stuff. But, when I was a young person, I was absolutely fascinated by John Keats. He died very young. He lived this very dramatic, romantic life. But now that I'm a little older, I kind of look at William Wordsworth. And Wordsworth started out as a radical. And he actually went to France during the French Revolution and ran kind of errands for some of the more radical people in the French Revolution. He came back to England and was writing tracts that would have gotten him arrested. And he was basically protesting. And then one day, like certain others of us who saw leftism collapse, he thought, you know what? This revolution has turned into a terror. They're killing priests in the street. They're murdering people. It turned into a world war. Napoleon tried to conquer all of Europe and Egypt and all these places. And he thought, they're obviously wrong. The radicals are wrong. And if you ever want to see cancel culture, as you say, poetry then was the art form. It was the big art form. Just like, we would say movies or TV are today. When Wordsworth became a conservative, they ripped him to pieces. I mean, it was cancel culture for the ages. There are famous poems that are still in anthologies about what a bad guy William Wordsworth was for becoming a conservative. And so, I mean, this was the real deal. And he kept saying, just like conservatives say today, he kept saying, no, I didn't change my opinions. It's the left that changed. I still believe in liberty. That's what I believe in. But the left doesn't believe in that. They're guillotining anybody who believes in liberty. They're trying to conquer every country that believes in liberty. I'm still the same. So it was exactly the same experience that we're having now in this very dramatic way. And the only difference was 6 of the greatest poets who have ever lived on earth. I mean, Keats was up there with Shakespeare. We're all living on the same island at the same time. Just a kind of a miracle in the same way the guys who wrote the Constitution and signed the Constitution, that was this kind of miracle of these great political minds. These were these great poetic minds who all turned up at the moment of need. They say, cometh the hour, cometh the man. Well, they all came and they were all there. And included in the book is Mary Shelley, who was a novelist, not a poet, but she wrote Frankenstein when she was about 18 or 19 years old, one of the classic novels of that time. And that, to me, is one of the key. That's the chapter on Frankenstein is about gender. It's about the fact people always say that Dr. Frankenstein, in inventing a monster, he was usurping God. But I point out, no, he wasn't usurping God. Anybody, people create life all the time. He was usurping women. He was creating a person without a mother. And to do that actually changes everything. And in writing about that, Mary Shelley invented science fiction. She invented the modern science fiction novel, again, as an 18-year-old. And science fiction still, to this day, is so often about gender. If you look at stories like Brave New World, they basically eliminate mothers, the giver. They relegate mothers to the lowest part of society. Terminator, I talk about Terminator in the book. One of my favorite movies, the first movie is one of my favorite action movies. The machines want to destroy humanity. So what do? They go back, they don't kill the rebel leader, they go back to kill his mother, because they know that mothers are not just the creators of life, they're also the creators of humanity. And that's another thing these poets, Wordsworth especially, knew. Many of them lost their mothers early. People died in childbirth all the time. And so many of them yearned for that experience, that mothering experience. And so they wrote very beautifully about it. And so all of these questions that are on the table again were there now. And these were geniuses dealing with them. And I just show the last third of the book as I show how they all lead back to the gospel and how you can reread the gospel in light of these poems and see a different gospel than maybe you've seen before.
Right. And man, I'm almost jealous when you talk about poems, actual poems being written about how horrible these conservatives were, these poets who became conservatives were. I always think it's a badge of honor when we get a mean tweet. Man, I want a poem, a mean poem written about me. That would show we'd really made it.
And they were good poems, you know?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And published poems even. Yeah. I mean, my goodness, someone was paying for that. That's like a whole other level here. So you, of course, have no relation to my colleague, Spencer Klavan. No relation at all. No
We've never
visible
met.
characteristic similarities, no voice characteristics that sound the same, never even met. I just, of course, father and son. You mentioned before, sort of mockingly, Spencer's intellect. We all know that he is a great thinker, a great mind. Did he approve of this book?
Oh yeah, he was great. He inspired the book. He read a draft of the book. And I say this in the acknowledgments, or I think it's in the acknowledgments. Spencer and I, as you say, Spencer went to Yale, then went to Oxford and got a doctorate in classics. I just talked to him 2 minutes ago. He's now learning Japanese with the other 7 languages he knows. He's a brilliant guy. And we have spent ages, hours and hours of life hiking together and drinking whiskey and smoking cigars together and discussing philosophy and religion and literature, the things that we love. And we have gotten to a point, and we both admit this, we have gotten to a point where we no longer remember whose ideas are whose, and so like our ideas have sort of interlocked at so many points that all I can say about this book is, I don't know which ideas are whose, and I could not have written it if I hadn't known him. I couldn't have written the book if I didn't know him. And it's kind of an interesting thing. I tease him sometimes about being Klavan 2.0, because I think he's going to have, hopefully, more time to take these ideas into the next generation. But they are important ideas, and they're old ideas that are relevant to this moment. And so you really are, in some ways, getting both of us in the book, because I seriously could not have written it without all the conversations he and I have been having for his whole life.
If you go to Amazon, it's the link that we'll provide. You can order this book, The Truth and Beauty, and you'll get it on release day. So we'll provide that link right below this video so that you know where to get this, and you can get it on April 5th, which is Tuesday, the day that it becomes available. And I hope that Spencer doesn't cross your name out and write his name and cross out Andrew, write Spencer here. But people will have to watch your interview with him to see.
It would be just like him to do that, but well.
Of course, Spencer hosts Young Heretics, the podcast produced by Soundfront, the same company that produces my podcast. Highly recommend it. Drew, this was a delight talking to you. As I said this to you actually before we went on air, before we started recording. This is one of my favorite book covers that I've ever seen on any book. It is truly amazing. And we were laughing because I said it actually makes me want to get out these old books. I mean, I want people to open your book, but it makes me want to get out these old books, which I think is exactly what the contents of the book will do as well. So highly recommend The Truth and Beauty, How the Lives and Works of England's Greatest Poets Point the Way to a Deeper Understanding of the Words of Jesus. As always, if you want exclusive early access to interviews just like this one, entertaining, funny, intellectual, I mean, all the compliments that I can give to Drew, of course, not giving to myself. Join us as a VIP on the Liz Wheeler Show community on Locals, lizwheelershow.com/locals, and use my promo code ACCESS for 1 month free on your annual subscription. That's lizwheelershow.com/locals. If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button below, and ring the bell to make sure you never miss a video.